There is a dangerous kind of weakness that often disguises itself as strength. It appears when a person raises their voice, rushes to defend themselves, or allows a single insult to control the direction of their day. They may believe they are standing their ground, but in truth, someone else has taken control of their mind. The moment another person can decide when you become angry, they have discovered the handle by which you can be moved. In ancient Japan, warriors understood that the most serious defeat did not begin when a sword entered the body. It began when irritation entered the mind. A skilled opponent did not always attack immediately. Sometimes he provoked, delayed, mocked, or created uncertainty. He waited for anger to disturb judgment and pride to expose an opening. The warrior who could not govern his emotions became predictable, and anything predictable could be defeated. The Japanese called the state beyond this disturbance Fudōshin, the immovable mind. It did not mean becoming cold, emotionless, or indifferent. It meant remaining inwardly steady while the world attempted to pull you in every direction. Fear could appear, anger could rise, and insult could reach the ears, yet none of them were permitted to seize command. This is the story of a man who believed his anger protected him until he discovered that it was the very thing keeping him weak. Chapter 1. The Man Who Reacted to Everything. Kenji was 36 years old when he began to notice that almost anyone could disturb him. A careless remark from a colleague could remain inside his mind for several days. A delayed message could make him imagine disrespect, rejection, or betrayal. Even a stranger's impatience on the road could awaken something violent within him, something that demanded to respond, correct, and prove. He did not think of himself as an angry man. He believed he was observant, direct, and unwilling to tolerate disrespect. Whenever he reacted strongly, he explained that other people had forced him to do it. They had spoken wrongly, behaved carelessly, or failed to recognize his value. In his mind, anger was evidence that he possessed standards, but his standards brought him no peace. He replayed conversations long after they had ended, creating sharper answers he wished he had delivered. He imagined victories over people who were no longer thinking about him. At night, while the room was silent, his opponents continued speaking inside his head. The more he defended his pride, the more fragile it became. Small comments began to feel like attacks, and ordinary disagreements felt like contests he could not afford to lose. His body remained in his home, but his mind was constantly following other people. They did not know they possessed this power over him, yet with a few words, they could alter his breathing, his thoughts, and his behavior. One evening, after an argument with his younger brother, Kenji left the house and walked without direction. His brother had accused him of making every disagreement heavier than it needed to be. Kenji responded harshly, listing years of sacrifices and moments when he had been ignored. He won the argument through volume, but as the door closed behind him, victory felt strangely similar to defeat. He walked until the streets grew quiet and found himself near a small martial arts hall he had passed many times. An elderly instructor was closing the wooden doors. Kenji had no interest in training, but something about the old man's unhurried movements irritated and fascinated him. The man appeared untouched by the urgency that governed everyone else. The instructor looked at Kenji and asked why he was walking as though someone were chasing him. Kenji nearly dismissed the question, but exhaustion made him honest. He said he was surrounded by people who did not understand how to speak properly, behave responsibly, or show respect. The old man listened without interruption and then asked a question Kenji was not prepared to answer. "If they can summon your anger whenever they choose," he said, "which one of you is the master?" Chapter 2. The First Defeat. Kenji entered the hall the following evening, partly out of curiosity and partly because the question had disturbed him. The instructor's name was Masato, and he had taught traditional swordsmanship for more than 40 years. There were no dramatic decorations inside the hall, only clean wooden floors, several practice swords, and a calligraphy scroll bearing 2 characters. Kenji asked what they meant. "Fudōshin," Masato replied, "the immovable mind." Kenji assumed this meant refusing to be intimidated. He spoke proudly about standing firm, confronting people, and never allowing anyone to walk over him. Masato did not challenge him. He handed Kenji a wooden sword and asked him to hold it in front of his body. Masato then began walking slowly around him. Without warning, he tapped Kenji on the shoulder, struck the wooden sword, stepped behind him, and criticized his posture. Kenji tightened his grip and tried to anticipate every movement. The more he concentrated on Masato, the more unstable he became. Then Masato said, "You are holding the sword like a man trying to protect his identity." Kenji turned sharply. The movement broke his balance, and Masato swept the wooden sword from his hands. It struck the floor before Kenji understood what had happened. The old instructor had not used force. He had used Kenji's reaction. "You did not lose the weapon when it touched the floor," Masato said. "You lost it when my words entered your pride." This was the first lesson. Provocation does not defeat a person by itself. It awakens something already waiting inside them. An insult finds pride, delay finds impatience, rejection finds insecurity, and criticism finds the hidden fear of being inadequate. The external event is only the hand that touches the wound. Kenji wanted a technique for ignoring people, but Masato refused to give him one. He explained that ignoring was often another form of resistance. A man could remain silent outwardly while continuing the argument internally. True composure was not the suppression of reaction. It was the removal of the inner structure that made provocation powerful. Miyamoto Musashi warned against being governed by preference, attachment, and resentment. In the principles later collected as the Dokkōdō, the path of walking alone, he advised the warrior not to pursue pleasure for its own sake, not to depend on partial feelings, and not to hold regret. These were not abstract moral rules. They were methods of becoming difficult to manipulate. A person controlled by preference can be disturbed whenever events fail to match what they want. A person attached to praise can be controlled through criticism. A person dependent on being understood can be controlled through misunderstanding. The more conditions you place upon your peace, the more handles you offer the world. Kenji had offered many handles. Chapter 3. The space before reaction. Masato gave Kenji a simple practice. For 30 days, whenever anger appeared, he was forbidden from responding immediately. He had to take one full breath, relax his hands, and observe the first sentence forming inside his mind. He did not have to become calm. He only had to witness the beginning of the reaction. Kenji considered the exercise too small to matter. He expected ancient wisdom to involve difficult rituals, severe training, or secret teachings. Instead, Masato asked him to notice his hands. The instructor explained that the body often reveals surrender before the mind admits it. The jaw tightens, the shoulders rise, the breath shortens, and the hands prepare for conflict. The first opportunity came the next morning. A colleague questioned a report Kenji had prepared and suggested that part of it was unclear. Instantly, Kenji felt heat rise through his chest. His mind produced its familiar sentence. "He is trying to embarrass me." Normally, Kenji would have responded by attacking the colleague's competence. This time, he remembered the practice. He breathed once, loosened his fingers, and observed the thought instead of obeying it. In that brief pause, something unexpected became visible. The colleague's words were not especially insulting. The humiliation existed mainly in Kenji's interpretation. His mind had transformed a question about the report into a judgment about his intelligence, status, and worth. He answered more slowly and asked which section needed clarification. The conversation ended within 2 minutes. No battle occurred, no reputation was destroyed, and no one carried resentment home. Yet Kenji did not feel victorious. He felt exposed. For years, he had believed his reactions were caused by other people. Now he saw that many of them were caused by meanings he added after the event. He was not responding to what had been said. He was responding to the story his pride created about what had been said. This space between event and reaction is where self-mastery begins. Without that space, a person lives like dry grass near a flame. Every spark becomes a fire because there is no distance between contact and combustion. Fudōshin begins by creating distance. The Zen practitioner observes thoughts without immediately identifying with them. A thought can enter the mind without becoming an instruction. Anger can arise without becoming speech. Fear can appear without becoming retreat. The warrior does not demand that the mind remain empty. He refuses to allow every visitor to become commander. Chapter 4. The Hidden Hunger for Respect. As the days passed, Kenji discovered that most of his anger had a common source. He wanted to be respected, but beneath that desire was a deeper hunger. He needed evidence that he mattered. When people agreed with him, answered quickly, or treated his opinions seriously, he felt secure. When they did not, his identity began to shake. Masato told him that a person who constantly demands respect is often unsure of the respect he has for himself. Genuine dignity does not need to announce itself during every disagreement. It is not strengthened by winning small confrontations, nor weakened by the carelessness of strangers. In Bushido, honor was not merely public reputation. It was the alignment between one's conduct and one's principles, especially when no audience was present. A warrior's dignity came from what he served within himself, not from his ability to force recognition from others. The person who knows what he stands for does not need every room to confirm it. Kenji began to see how often he had abandoned his own principles in order to defend his pride. He valued discipline, yet became impulsive when challenged. He valued family, yet wounded those closest to him to avoid appearing wrong. He valued strength, yet allowed words to govern his nervous system. The contradiction was painful. He had been protecting an image of strength while repeatedly behaving without mastery. His anger did not prove that he was powerful. It proved that his peace was available to anyone willing to touch the right insecurity. Masato instructed him to write down every provocation that disturbed him. Beside each event, he had to name what he believed was threatened. Was it his intelligence, authority, attractiveness, importance, control, or need to be right? The list became a map of his attachments. A delayed reply threatened his importance. Advice threatened his intelligence. Disagreement threatened his authority. Another person's success threatened his belief that he was progressing quickly enough. The world had not created these fears. It had merely revealed them. This is why provocation can become a teacher. The person who irritates you may be pointing toward an attachment you have refused to examine. The insult may be false, yet your reaction still contains information. Something inside you believes it must respond immediately to preserve itself. An immovable mind is not built by avoiding these moments. It is built by entering them consciously and asking, what exactly am I protecting? Chapter 5. The Discipline of Non-Participation. Masato's next instruction was more difficult. Kenji had to stop participating in unnecessary conflict. He was not told to avoid necessary confrontation or tolerate genuine mistreatment. He was told to distinguish between a problem that required action and a provocation that merely demanded reaction. This distinction transformed the practice. Many situations that felt urgent were not problems at all. They were invitations to perform anger, defend ego, or compete for the final word. A stranger's rude tone did not require correction. A dismissive expression did not require investigation. An online comment from someone who knew nothing about him did not require a carefully constructed reply. These things produced discomfort, but discomfort was not the same as danger. Kenji realized that he had been treating emotional irritation as a command. Whenever discomfort appeared, he rushed to remove it through explanation, accusation, or retaliation. He did not know how to let an unpleasant feeling exist without acting upon it. The Japanese principle of Gaman teaches dignified endurance under pressure. It is often translated as patience or perseverance, but its deeper meaning involves bearing difficulty without allowing it to corrupt one's character. Gaman is not passive weakness. It is the strength to carry discomfort without spreading it. Kenji began practicing Gaman in small moments. When someone interrupted him, he let the irritation pass through his body before deciding whether to speak. When his brother disagreed, he listened without preparing a counterattack. When traffic slowed, he observed the restless demand that reality should move according to his schedule. These moments appeared insignificant, but they formed the structure of his mind. Self-mastery is rarely built during one grand test. It is built through hundreds of ordinary moments in which reaction is available, but not chosen. Every unnecessary argument you refuse is a repetition of discipline. Every insult you examine before answering strengthens inner distance. Every moment of discomfort you endure without losing your conduct teaches the nervous system that agitation does not require surrender. The goal is not to become silent in every situation. Silence can be cowardice when truth must be spoken. The goal is to speak because the moment requires speech, not because pride is desperate for relief. There is a difference between responding from principle and reacting from injury. The words may sound similar, but their source is entirely different. One comes from clarity, the other comes from compulsion. Chapter 6. The Enemy. Within the Gate. Several weeks into his training, Kenji faced a more serious test. His manager publicly criticized a project he had led, describing the outcome as disappointing. Some of the criticism was fair, but the manner was careless and humiliating. Kenji felt every old mechanism awaken at once. His chest tightened, his face grew hot, and his mind began gathering evidence against the manager. He remembered previous mistakes the man had made and imagined exposing them before everyone. The desire to strike back was so strong that it felt righteous. Kenji took one breath, but the anger remained. He relaxed his hands, yet his thoughts continued moving violently. For the first time, he understood that the practice was not designed to make anger disappear. It was designed to prevent anger from making the decision. He asked for specific examples of what had failed and took notes while the manager spoke. His voice was controlled, but inwardly he was struggling. He did not feel peaceful or spiritually elevated. He felt as though he were holding a heavy door closed while something powerful pushed from the other side. After the meeting, he did not congratulate himself. He walked outside and waited until his breathing became normal. Then he reviewed the criticism, separated what was useful from what was careless, and prepared a private conversation with the manager. The next day, Kenji spoke firmly. He accepted responsibility for the project's weaknesses, but explained that public humiliation did not improve performance. He asked that future criticism remain direct and specific without becoming personal. His tone was steady because he no longer needed the conversation to restore his pride. The manager apologized. Had Kenji reacted during the meeting, the same boundary would have sounded like retaliation. Because he waited, it became clear instruction. This is the power of an immovable mind. It does not eliminate force. It makes force precise. The samurai trained not merely to strike, but to strike without unnecessary movement. Every wasted motion created vulnerability. The same principle applies to speech. A person without discipline wastes words, explanations, threats, and emotional energy. A disciplined person uses only what the situation requires. Kenji learned that calmness was not the absence of confrontation. It was confrontation without inner collapse. Chapter 7. The End of Immediate Obedience. Most people think freedom means being able to do whatever they desire. The warrior's understanding is more severe. Freedom means not being forced to obey every desire, fear, emotion, or impulse that appears. When anger says, "Answer now," can you wait? When pride says, "Prove yourself," can you remain silent? When insecurity says, "Make them understand you," can you allow misunderstanding to exist? Until you can disobey these internal commands, your freedom remains incomplete. Masato taught Kenji to treat every strong emotion as a messenger, not a ruler. The messenger could bring useful information. A boundary had been crossed, a fear had been touched, or an injustice required attention. But the messenger was not qualified to decide the response. This distinction became one of Kenji's non-negotiable practices. He did not send messages while angry. He did not make important decisions while humiliated. He did not confront people while his only goal was to make them feel what he felt. He created distance through small systems. Difficult messages were written and left unsent until the following morning. During conflict, he lowered his voice rather than matching the other person's volume. When he felt compelled to explain himself repeatedly, he stated his position once and allowed others to accept or reject it. These were not techniques for appearing calm. They were methods for protecting clarity. Kenji knew that under pressure, good intentions were unreliable. He needed structures that remained available when wisdom became difficult to access. Ancient disciplines often rely upon form for this reason. The practitioner repeats a movement, ritual, or sequence until it becomes stable under pressure. In Shuhari, one first obeys the form, later understands it, and eventually moves beyond it. Discipline begins with deliberate structure because the untrained mind cannot be trusted to improvise during emotional storms. Kenji's breath, relaxed hands, delayed messages, and measured voice became his form. Through repetition, the pause grew more natural. What once required great effort slowly became part of his identity. He was no longer a man trying to control his temper. He was becoming a man who did not grant anger immediate authority. Chapter 8. When Silence Becomes Strength. Kenji's relationships began to change. Some people appreciated his new steadiness, but others reacted negatively. They had grown accustomed to his defensiveness and knew how to pull him into familiar arguments. When he stopped responding as before, they accused him of becoming cold, distant, or arrogant. This revealed another form of provocation, the pressure to return to an older version of yourself because it is more convenient for others. When you stop over-explaining, people who benefited from your uncertainty may call you secretive. When you establish boundaries, those who benefited from your lack of them may call you selfish. The warrior's path often becomes lonely at this stage. You must decide whether your discipline requires permission from those who preferred your disorder. If their misunderstanding can force you to abandon your practice, then approval remains your master. Musashi spent much of his life separating himself from dependency. His solitude was not merely physical, it was the refusal to build identity upon comfort, praise, possessions, or acceptance. A person who needs little from the world becomes difficult for the world to control. Kenji did not withdraw from everyone. He stopped chasing understanding from those committed to misunderstanding him. He clarified his intentions once, listened where dialogue was possible, and became silent where conversation had become a ritual of conflict. This silence was different from the bitter silence he once used as punishment. It contained no hidden demand that the other person suffer, apologize, or pursue him. It was simply the end of participation. There is great power in refusing to enter a battle that has no worthy purpose. Not every accusation deserves a defense. Not every challenge deserves acceptance. Not every person deserves access to your emotional energy. Silence becomes strength when it is chosen from clarity rather than fear. It says, "I have seen this invitation, and I will not build my home inside it." Chapter 9. The Return to the Beginning. After 3 months, Masato repeated the exercise from Kenji's first evening. He handed him a wooden sword and began walking around him. He criticized his stance, struck the weapon unexpectedly, and questioned whether Kenji had learned anything at all. Kenji felt irritation arise, but he did not chase it. His grip remained firm without becoming rigid. His attention stayed wide, resting not only on Masato's movements, but also on his own breathing, posture, and balance. Masato stepped behind him and said, "You are still trying to appear calm." For a moment, pride wanted to turn. Kenji recognized the impulse and let it pass. He did not need to prove that he had improved. Masato struck the sword, but this time it remained in Kenji's hands. The instructor smiled and stepped away. "Better," he said, "but do not become proud of being difficult to provoke. Pride will create a new handle." This final warning revealed the depth of the practice. Even calmness can become an identity that requires protection. A person may begin to think, "I am more disciplined than others," and then become angry whenever someone questions their composure. The ego can wear the clothing of wisdom. Fudōshin is not a performance. It does not need witnesses. The goal is not to become known as the calmest person in the room. The goal is to remain available to reality without being dragged away by every internal disturbance. The immovable mind is not frozen. It adapts without losing its center. Like a mountain, it remains rooted, yet like water, it responds to the shape of what it encounters. Chapter 10. The Practice of the Immovable Mind. To become impossible to provoke, you must first stop treating provocation as something that exists only outside you. The external person may light the match, but the fuel is usually internal. Pride, insecurity, impatience, attachment, and the hunger for control make the fire possible. Begin by observing the body. When irritation appears, notice the jaw, hands, shoulders, and breath. Do not immediately attempt to remove the sensation. Simply prevent the body's first movement from becoming the mind's final decision. Then identify the threatened attachment. Ask what you believe you are losing. Respect, authority, control, approval, or the image of being right may be at stake. Name it clearly, because what remains unnamed continues to operate in darkness. Create a system for delay. One breath may be enough for a small irritation. A serious conflict may require an hour, a night, or several days. The correct response often becomes visible only after the desire for emotional relief has weakened. Separate boundaries from retaliation. A boundary protects what is necessary. Retaliation attempts to transfer pain. You may speak firmly, leave a destructive environment, or refuse further contact without hatred. Calmness does not require continued access for those who repeatedly violate your peace. Practice non-participation in small conflicts. Allow someone else to have the final word. Permit a false assumption to remain when correcting it serves no meaningful purpose. Let minor disrespect reveal the other person's character without changing your own. Most importantly, stop building peace upon conditions you cannot control. People will misunderstand you. Plans will be delayed. Criticism will sometimes be unfair, and those you love may fail to respond with wisdom. If peace requires all of these things to behave according to your preference, peace will remain rare. Conclusion. The warrior. No one can move. Kenji did not become a man without anger. He became a man who could feel anger without kneeling before it. He still encountered disrespect, carelessness, criticism, and misunderstanding, but these events no longer possessed immediate access to his conduct. His strength became quieter. He no longer needed to win every conversation because he understood that many arguments offered no victory. He no longer demanded that everyone recognize his value because he had stopped placing his value in their hands. This is the essence of Fudōshin. The world may strike the surface, but it does not easily reach the center. Emotion may rise, but principle remains seated above it. The person who cannot be provoked is not powerful because others fear him. He is powerful because others cannot command him. They cannot use insult to choose his words, rejection to choose his worth, or chaos to choose his state of mind. There will always be people who invite you into disorder. Some will do it deliberately, while others will simply act from their own wounds. Your task is not to control them. Your task is to ensure that their lack of discipline does not become yours. Stand where you have chosen to stand. Breathe before the mind rushes forward. Speak when truth requires speech. Remain silent when pride demands performance, and leave when dignity requires distance. The strongest warrior is not the one who defeats every opponent before him. It is the one who can no longer be defeated by the enemy within.